Welcome to episode 33 of the Minds Capital podcast, the show devoted to the growing world of independent sponsorship and entrepreneurial private equity. My name is Will Smith, and I'm here with my partners in Minds Capital, Max Lummis and Niklas James. Today's conversation is with Rob Casper. Rob is a president and operating executive within Kingsway Financial Services. Kingsway is a public company that has pivoted its business model to focus on acquiring businesses in the lower middle market. It has an operator in residence program that echoes what something like an Alpine offers. And in fact, Rob worked at Alpine before Kingsway. So we had Rob on to learn what it looks like from the inside of a public company buying and growing small businesses. Before we turn to Rob, just a little bit of a teaser. Next week is the annual McGuire Woods Conference, the independent sponsor, the biggest independent sponsor conference of the year, 2 days in Dallas, Tuesday, Wednesday. And of course, all three of us will be there. I'm getting in bright and early on Tuesday morning. The way these independent sponsor conferences, in my experience, go, including McGuire Woods, is that there is a lot of speed dating, which anybody who has been to one of these knows is a very efficient and organized process that sponsors with deals to raise capital for are paired in advance, scheduled meetings with capital who is coming to find deals to deploy capital into. So I don't know what it is at McGuire Woods, but in other conferences, they can be 20, 30-minute meetings, and you line them up back to back to back to back. And it can be quite a marathon of a day or two. And then, of course, they're at McGuire Woods, my first year. So this is what I understand from the outside. There's also content, there's also panels, but it's really that speed dating piece that's the core. So we'll be there for both days. And on Tuesday evening, so the evening between day one and day two, we're going to do our episode, our Minds Capital episode from right there at the conference. The three of us will hop on to Riverside here and record kind of our frontline thoughts from what we've seen the day at the conference. So that'll be a lot of fun. So listener, if you wish you could go to McGuire Woods and can't, make sure you listen to next week's episode where we'll tell you what you're missing. And then the three of us as Minds Capital are doing something that I'm very excited about, something very special. That Thursday, so the first day after the conference, we're doing an offsite. Niklas, why don't you tell us what we have in store for that?
Right. On the Thursday, it's our long-promised Investor Day. And so this is an opportunity, an exclusive event for our investors to get together with us in person. So much of what we do is remote and digital, but we are gathering folks on that Thursday in Dallas. We deliberately put it on that day because a lot of our investors, as well as many of our portfolio sponsors, are in Dallas already for the McGuire Woods Conference. And of course, all of us are together as well. And so we're going to do that on the Thursday. We are starting the day by doing a tour of one of our portfolio companies, where one of our portfolio sponsors and the CEO there will be giving us a tour of the facilities. And then in the afternoon, starting at lunch and until 5 p.m., we're going to be at a venue where we'll have a series of speakers, external as well as ourselves. The external speakers, we have a fantastic lineup. We have the king of the swing, the former #1 bowling champion of the world, Mike Fagan, who is currently an independent sponsor. He's coming to join us, as well as Peter Learman from Axial, Christian Berger from McGuire Woods, Sylvie Gedant from Citron Cooperman, as well as representatives from GF Data, who we have a strategic sponsorship with. So great opportunity for us to learn a lot and get together in person with investors.
And the other thing to say about our Investor Day, Niklas, is that it coincides with our opening Flagship 2, our second fund at Minds Capital. We opened that on September 29th, so 2 days ago as of right now. And any LP that commits before next week can join us for that Investor Day. So we've already got some people who will, of course, a lot of people from Fund 1, but also some people who are now in Fund 2 and can join us there on Thursday in Dallas for this Investor Day and offsite. Okay, let's turn our attention now to today's interview with Rob Casper of Kingsway. Max, what did you think of our conversation with him, please?
So Kingsway is a very unique, basically what it is, it's almost like a search fund or independent sponsor accelerator. And Kingsway is actually a public company. The search fund Accelerator, it was created later and is now a vehicle for them to invest in privately held companies. But yet they still have, as I understand, some public company or some public capital backing, which gives them some firepower to, complete these transactions. So Rob is a member of the search fund Accelerator. He's an operating partner, and as I understand it, Kingsway at any given time has a number of operating partners that are out there diligencing and looking for deals much the same way that a searcher or independent sponsor would, but Kingsway is providing them with some back office support and obviously funding support in enabling them to close these deals. And Rob is very much an operator. He is an HBS grad, and he's got a good background operating businesses and working in private equity in the past. So Rob is currently running a plumbing platform, which he talks about, and he gets into some of the details about why he likes plumbing versus some of the other home service trades, such as landscaping, and mentions that plumbing's attractive because it requires licensure in most states and therefore creates a moat around the business, or at least partially a moat. It's a higher standard of care that's required to operate a plumbing business, and so not just anybody can do it, unlike a landscaping business where there's no licensure required and it's far fewer barriers to entry. So he likes that about the plumbing industry, and believes that his operational experience is helpful now because the plumbing industry, as he says, is sort of in the mid to late stages or mid to late innings of the roll-up cycle. So Rob describes that in the first few innings or stages of the roll-up cycle, buyers are mostly financial and focused on just kind of cobbling together whatever they can, for the most part, at a decent price and putting some pieces together, not doing a whole lot of integration, not doing a whole lot of operational optimization. That first inning buyer group then sells it to the next level. And then, these roll-ups kind of move through the cycle with different buyers and different strategies as they go along. So because plumbing is sort of in the mid stages, as Rob describes it, it's much more operationally focused at this point, and that's Rob's specialty. So an interesting discussion. Kingsway's structure is very interesting and unique. Rob's obviously very, very operationally focused, and that came through in the interview.
Yeah, the theme of operations was stronger here than maybe in any of our interviews to date. I'm not sure we've had such a pure operator on yet, and so that's a big theme today. And I really enjoyed it. And Rob, on top of just being so operationally focused, you can tell. He says that he's one of these very kind of servant leaders. I mean, he's really somebody who's trying to enable and do right by his employees. That really comes across. The other thing on the operations point that I'll make is he joked that he's biased here, but he does talk about private equity as kind of being the three legs to the stool: deal sourcing, underwriting, and then operations. And he says that generally in private equity, like at larger shops, those three are siloed. There are specialists who do each of the three, and of course he would fall into the operations leg of the stool. But he does say something interesting where if you can be excel at operations, the other two can follow from that. And And he is leading his own deals. So that's part of the Kingsway model. He is out there sourcing and then leading the underwriting. I don't know if he's leading it, but he's certainly involved in the underwriting. And then, of course, operating. So just interesting to hear the perspective of somebody who's exposed to all three legs of the stool, and very solidly believes which of those three is kind of paramount. Again, taking into account his own bias. But anyway, a lot of fun to hear from an operator, because so often we have pretty financial conversations with independent sponsors, and this one was far less that.
I liked how Rob mentioned that the financials are a lagging indicator related to the performance of the business. Yeah. And that basically, if you treat your people well and enable them to be successful, that's paramount to anything else, and that the financial results will come. I thought that was very insightful and very applicable to all businesses.
Yeah. What do you think, Niklas?
I always say that performance yields opportunities. And I think that's the point you're highlighting here, is that if they can be an above average or best in class operator, then deals and other opportunities will come their way and give them optionality. Beyond that, I think this conversation was interesting to me because it's the first time we talked to a public company participant. And he is very cautious about saying anything that is non-compliant. But the concept of a large, or I don't know how large, but a public company pivoting their business model away from what they did historically and into becoming a search fund accelerator, to become a serial acquirer or a compounder of small businesses is very interesting. And I think it might be something that they can become very successful with. And so Rob is in the one of the early operators within that game at Kingsway. And I would imagine the idea here is that they hope to generate enough cash flow from the operating businesses over time in order to buy more and more business. And that way it becomes compounding. And of course, as any business, you have the choice of paying it out in dividends. Or in their case, if they have a deal model locked down, they can continue to buy good businesses and increase their returns over time. And unlike private equity, where compounding in this way gets difficult because you don't have infinite time. Your investors have different objectives and want to get out eventually. With a public company, any investor can sell their stock at any time, right? So you don't have that time cap. And that's why I think perhaps a public company paradoxically is particularly well positioned to follow this permanent holdco strategy that we sometimes hear about in the independent sponsor universe elsewhere.
You tried to get out of him what the public company financial structure, financial requirements mean for this model, and he wasn't able to speak. He referred us to investor relations a few times, understandably. But it sure piqued my interest. To your point, Niklas, about the 5-year timeline that private equity, traditional private equity, lives within, how that it isn't there at all in a public company. Of course, public companies are also accused of short-termism and living by the quarter and so on. So there's much more to unpack there if we can at some later date. But it's intriguing how this holdco model, which is of course big in independent sponsor land, but it's also big in ETA and search land, where I come from. How it marries well or not with different financial structures, be it traditional private equity fund, public company, self-funded search, SBA type buyers. Niklas, you and I were having a spirited conversation offline about that. So much more to learn here, I think.
Right. Kingsway offers a new flavor of the same discussion we have in so many other variants. A couple of things I wanted to bring up, actually. One about home services, but first, before I jump there, Rob has a history from Alpine. I think he was in one of their opcos, portcos.
Yeah.
And now he's at Kingsway. And these roles as an entrepreneur, operator in residence are the hottest thing out of MBA programs these days. And so I think if you go back in time, 25 years ago, McKinsey was the number one employer when you came out of business school. 20 years ago, before the banking crisis, it was probably the banking companies, right? The investment bankers, Goldman Sachs. 15 years ago, when Rob and I were at HBS together, I would say Blackstone and the big PE firms were pretty much the hottest game in town. 10 years ago, it was Google and the big tech companies. 5 years ago, perhaps it was the startups. And today, it's Alpine Investors, who is the number one employer in terms of number of applicants out of Stanford GSB. And so it's just interesting to hear the inside track from Rob on what that looks like in the version of Kingsway. And maybe in 5 years, Minds Capital will be the number one employer.
Well, I have to say, Niklas, that point is a little concerning because it's like, makes me wonder, have we reached, peak boring businesses? And it's all down here from now. Once the business school grads all pour into a category, it seems to be like that's the, when it's at its top of its maturation. So hopefully not. But I think that is frankly, a profound commentary on just how far the appeal of lower middle market operations and acquisition has come, that at Stanford GSB, the number one job or the position receiving the most applications is to run one of these sweaty blue collar businesses at Alpine. I mean, that says so much about this trend.
And talking about maturation, to circle back to home services, where Rob Casper is an operator with his plumbing company at Kingsway. I have extensive experience in home services. I'm a sponsor of what was an HVAC deal. It's now a home services roll-up. We're still in this deal. We've had a great journey on it. And luckily we got in. I got involved with the company in late 2018. So we got in before the big boom happened with COVID. And we've had a great journey so far. We've had a lot of fun. But I think it was interesting to me to hear Rob's perspectives because he's in a newer platform. I think one of the angles that are hopefully good for his is that he's in more like second-tier markets in the Midwest, where perhaps it's not quite as crowded as it is in Dallas, where I've seen the market, or here in Tampa, where I live, in St. Petersburg. Now, I will say home services is often kind of a joke. Even on our podcast, people will joke about HVAC roll-ups, and that's what everyone does. You see memes on social media and on X. And I get it. There's been a lot of transaction activity in this space, and there are so many deals happening because it's such a big fragmented space. But in my inside perspective, I will say the industry has evolved a lot, even in my 7 years in it. And so where in the 2010s, you saw a super fragmented industry, but also largely unsophisticated, which frankly is what attracted me to it. I saw an industry where my white collar skills and strategy skills could really benefit these small businesses that were still founder led and more mom and pop in nature. I think this dynamic has dramatically shifted by now. And not only because you've had a lot of PE coming in, because that is certainly true, but it remains a fragmented market. But I think there are a couple of other things that have happened. First and foremost, the sophistication levels are up. Where 10 years ago, many of the companies were not on software yet. They would use pen and paper for scheduling. Today, everyone is on software. And so this has streamlined processes across the industry, ServiceTitan being the number one platform. So everyone is using fairly sophisticated, but also standardized processes today. I think with the software also comes a much more robust data capabilities. You have AI integration, such as call center clerks that are actually fully automated. This is coming online faster than we all realize. You have different technologies in the field that are AI, and of course, putting together sales templates and all of this, tons of AI going on. And then in general, just a lot more white collar skills today with M&A. And because these organizations are bigger, it's also back office in terms of accounting and marketing and HR is a lot more sophisticated than the $5, $10, $15 million businesses had 10 years ago. And so I challenge Rob on this a little bit because in my mind, some of the upside has been squeezed out of plumbing businesses. They're in the late innings, as Max discussed here. And I think he makes good counterpoints for why they will be successful and also that they're in it for the long run. a little bit all over the place here now, but I would say one on the innings comment. It's been interesting with Minds Capital. We have new deals that come in every day, but we don't actually get a ton of HVAC deals. And that tells me there aren't that many of them any longer in the search and independent sponsor worlds, simply because the space is too crowded and the multiples are too high. So it's not as attractive as it was when I acquired my platform a few years ago.
I'll respond to a few things there, Niklas, since we're talking so much about home services and on acquiring minds. My other podcast, I talk to a lot of people who've acquired home services business. And one of the other phenomena that I understand happened started to really happen, Niklas, right around when you acquired your platform, I guess, was the increasing sophistication of digital marketing. And of course, we all have lived this, so you know what I mean. But my understanding is that today, a home services business, it's all won and lost online. So your mastery of generating leads via the platforms, via Google, whatever, mostly Google, is really where you make the business. And so part of that is your sophistication with digital marketing and PPC, et cetera, but also at SEO, but also the reviews. And so, of course, we're all asked as consumers for reviews, no matter what we do, let alone home services. But it's, as I understand it, it's a table stakes these days to make sure you're collecting reviews in every customer interaction. I don't know if you guys saw this, but there was a New York Times article, I think, where a lot of small businesses, home services businesses, small businesses, I guess, not necessarily specifically home services, that are being extorted for money by offshore people for just a few $100 here and there. But somebody in Pakistan writes you to say, I'm gonna flood your Google My Page with 20 negative reviews unless you pay me $250. And so anyway, you can go off and read that article and how that's being dealt with. But my little take on that is that it's interesting that what we considered, the most in-person, physical, least likely to be threatened by Amazon, even AI, type of business, turning wrenches if it's plumbing, or, fixing, the condenser if it's air conditioning. Actually now are businesses that have platform risk. Platform risk is something that we talk about with tech businesses, e-commerce businesses. If you've got the old FBA businesses from Amazon, all of your business is coming from one platform, and how dangerous and fragile that is. But in fact, in some ways, home services now, so much your business lives or dies by how many 5-star reviews, what your reviews are and how many of them you have on a single platform, Google. So it's a bitter irony, because it's like, is there anywhere to go to escape the dominance in our lives of the big tech businesses? Anyway, but I'm now rambling, but I just thought it was an interesting point about how far all this has come.
Well, you'll have to send me that article. That's interesting. I hadn't seen it directly, but reviews are all important. But just back there a little bit, I think there is this conception that HVAC and home services are so simple businesses because it's intuitive how the business model works. Everyone understands. Labor walks in the door, you pay for their hours, but it's deceptive. These businesses are incredibly ops heavy and very, very sophisticated now with best-in-class operators. They're crowded spaces, which means they're low margin in general, especially if you're not the top performer. And there is seasonality, there is blue-collar labor, there is inventory, there is fleet, there is CapEx, and a lot of COGS that you have to make sure that you're on top of. In addition to all the white-collar aspects, you mentioned digital marketing, I mentioned accounting, HR, M&A is a big one now, of course, also you have to master. So as a sponsor, not only is it an expensive industry, but it's also actually a deceptively complicated business to run. It's a full MBA to do what Rob is doing and being on the ground in one of these businesses.
We talk about the innings, right? Well, in a game of baseball, after the ninth inning, the game ends.
Usually,
not so. Right. One hopes it doesn't drag into the 15th inning. What happens? The metaphor falls apart in the real world because these industries aren't going anywhere. They're not going away when it's the ninth inning. But what does it mean for the dynamics of an industry when you're past the ninth inning? Does it just mean that there are no more buyers anymore. And I guess let me narrow the question down. Is it good news or bad news for a long-term holder of say, an HVAC or a plumbing business when you get past the ninth inning and private equity has exhausted itself in doing the acquisitions it's going to do? It's probably a good thing, right? Because multiples come down, and then if you long-term holder want to do some acquisitions, all of a sudden they become accessible again?
Such a great question. I have no idea. I think the theory within the home services industry that I, to some extent, subscribe to is the mom and pops, the chuck in a truck, man in a van guy. He will continue to exist because the barriers of entry are very, very low. And if their goal is just to work for themselves, maybe have one or two helpers and put food on the table, that kind of entity will continue to service local markets. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you will have these billion-dollar roll-ups, of which they have brands that are in any local metro, hundreds of millions of revenue. And so they have the resources to be fully staffed with the back office and the marketing, and they have so many vehicles in any given market to totally crowd the market. So I think they will continue to win and probably build market share because they have an outsized influence on digital marketing and awareness and visibility. And so the theory is that these independent sponsor-led platforms that are in the middle, they need to have the full back office, but they're not quite large enough where they have 500 vehicles in and around Houston. They will be gobbled up by the big guys. As far as where multiples are going, I don't know. I mean, the very big ones are getting to a point where they'll get public soon, and they'll just be large assets, probably trading in public multiple, public valuations, right? And they'll continue to do accretive add-on acquisitions, even as public companies, just like Kingsway is doing, in fact.
Mm-hmm.
If there's not some huge moat for people spinning out of these big organizations and starting up their own chuck in a truck operation, things like employee satisfaction, customer pricing, all these basic fundamentals come back into play, I think, as these businesses aggregate. And if it gets to the point where the customers are unhappy or the employees are unhappy, and there's not really anything stopping them from going and starting up their own business and building a better mousetrap, I think it's interesting. I think that's really what the free market's all about. So it makes you wonder if this all cycles up in some of these industries and then recycles again. And, it'll be tough in that sense because of the purchasing power of these big organizations with suppliers and things like that. So maybe it's harder to compete on price for the chuck and the truck in the future. And maybe that is the barrier to entry that becomes too big to get around. But I think in a free market, you're always going to be held accountable if, no matter the size of your company, if you're not doing a good job, if you're not treating your employees right, if your employees aren't happy, if your customers are dissatisfied, if your eye isn't following the ball anymore, something will disrupt you. And so I think it will be interesting to see across all these industries what happens over the next 20 years. Do we get some of these entrepreneurs to come back and say, I'm going to do a startup now as opposed to, buying a company? I'm sick and tired of working for this company. I'm not making enough. I could go do this on my own, have a better schedule, have a better lifestyle. It's happened in the past. Will it happen again? I guess we'll have to see.
Yeah. Great, guys. Well, let's get to our conversation here with Rob. Quick reminder to the audience that tune in next week for our Frontlines report from McGuire Woods. And if you are going to be at McGuire Woods, please find one or all of us, say hello. Of course, if you're raising for a deal, definitely say hello. Try to get on one of our calendars. You've probably already got your link through your McGuire Woods account, but we're all in there. So book time with one of us, and if nothing else, come collar us on the conference floor itself. And also, if you're interested in participating in Minds Capital as an LP, Flagship 2 has opened. This is not an advertisement. I'm just relaying the news of that fact. There is a registration form on the website for accredited investors. If you fill that out, you will get more information about Flagship 2. We just opened that on September 29th, Monday, September 29th. And again, if you do want to participate and do so, commit quickly, you'll be able to join us at the Investor Day next Thursday. Great. Okay, here is episode 33 of the Minds Capital podcast with Rob Casper of Kingsway. Enjoy. Welcome to the Minds Capital podcast, your connection to the growing world of independent sponsors and entrepreneurial private equity. We are your hosts, Will Smith and Niklas James. Rob Casper is based in Houston and is an operator in residence at Kingsway, a public company. Rob is a former Marine Corps officer with extensive experience from private equity and management consulting. Kingsway supported Rob soup to nuts, acquiring 3 plumbing companies in the Midwest, which he now leads. There are, of course, thousands of private equity companies, sponsors focused on acquiring lower middle market businesses, but Kingsway is an example of what the model can look like for a public company. Rob Casper, welcome to the Minds Capital podcast.
Yeah, thank you, Will. Thank you, Niklas.
Rob, you've said that formal education doesn't compare with the school of hard knocks. Let's start by hearing what you meant by that, please.
Yeah, absolutely. And 100% agree with that. College and all that is terrific. It can give you the theory. It can give you some of, maybe even some of the practical training in bits and pieces, but there's no substitute for reality. And the school of hard knocks is reality. I really appreciate the folks who have been there, done it, and been in the trades 20, 30, 40 years, right? Full career. The gray hairs, every single one of those gray hairs, I'm working on mine. But those gray hairs, there's a lesson in there.
And fair to assume, Rob, that folks from the world of finance may underestimate that?
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I'm nothing against the bean counters. But
what mistakes do the bean counters make not understanding all of the hard-won knowledge and lessons?
The biggest thing about services business is the people, right? If you lose the people, you got nothing. And so the best thing about a services business, by the way, is the people. And if you enjoy who you're working with and doing things the right way and serving customers, it's some of the most rewarding work that you can do, and actually very similar to my time in the Marines. So, I think that's the appeal of it. I can't speak to the financial world. I've never been in investment banking or any of that stuff. But, it seems very numbers driven. And I appreciate the numbers. It's important to know the numbers. But I view the numbers as a result of doing the right work in the right way. And if you serve your plumbers, if you serve your people, if you are doing the right work in the right way, the numbers will come. My experience has been that, it's a lagging metric, right? If you want to think about it that way. The financials are a lagging metric. And if you run your business with financials as your leading metric, woe be unto you. That's a great way to lose a lot of people. It's not motivating. Nobody's ever been, well, maybe an investment banker has been motivated by a dollar more, but that's not why the majority of these folks want to be in the business. It's to do good work in the right way to help out customers and those in the community. So anyway, can't steer by the financials of the company.
Great, Rob. Well, thank you for that. I mentioned that Kingsway is a public company. I mentioned that you're an operator in residence there. It's an interesting model. We'll get there, but maybe we get there by hearing how you got there.
So I did go to college and graduated as an engineer, went into the Marine Corps, and as an infantry officer, and I deployed 3 times. And it was my privilege to serve with some really terrific men. The infantry was all men, and great. That was a good time in my life, a hard time in my life as well. So, but I was glad to serve with those men. From there, went back to school, and then coming out, worked in consulting. I hate to say it, but it's true. I worked in consulting, and then spent the next 10 plus years in the lower middle market, private equity. So did a search at one point right after that, and then quickly went into family office, and then lower middle market PE, and did lower middle market PE ops, and cut my teeth, got punched in the face, did a bunch of things, but that's what brought me here. And I think the exciting thing about Kingsway is we don't have necessarily the same time horizon. It's not a 2, 3, or 5 year sort of fix and flip. We really can be long term. It's not a fund structure, right? So all those things are supportive to a longer holding period and a longer operating period, which means you can really do some exciting things for your people, right? You can invest in your people in ways that maybe is less common in some other routes. I want to be careful what I say here. But, yeah.
Well, Rob, you had told us that you were on track or could have, you turned down some other maybe more conventional opportunities in your PE operations track, right, to go do this at Kingsway. Yeah. I guess you've just given us one of those reasons. You liked the long-termism of this project. Mm-hmm. What else? Was there anything else? Why did you choose this?
Yeah, it was a dark horse candidate. Kingsway was. I thought, okay, I'm just going to continue to move along the career ladder, and was talking with some folks, while I was at Alpine about moving over them. But yeah, what I think was compelling was the long termism and was the low churn. I'll just use, we have somebody in our HR department, Yvonne. She's been with Kingsway 28 years. Mm. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. I like that. I remember, being at a few places, you get over 2 years and you're thinking, gosh, I'm one of the, more tenured folks here. That's kind of scary, right? So I appreciate that long-termism and that tenure. And I think that, candidly, I think that resonates with a lot of the companies that we partner with. When we think, Mark, who of course was the previous owner of Buds, he had been at Buds he's been at Buds for 40 years. That's pretty good. So I love that. And we've got a number of plumbers there and in other locations that have been there, over 10, 15, even over 20 years. That's awesome. That's a sign of a wonderful, wonderful, healthy work environment, right? That's it's helpful when the partnering entity has alignment in that tenure and in those values.
Can you now say more then about this model, the Kingsway model,
Sure.
from the perspective of like why it's long term? It's not a fund, I guess, because it's just a company. It's not trying to deploy capital.
Yeah, it's public equity, not private.
Also, the program or the accelerator, the search accelerator that you're part of, what does that look like for people who are unaware of the Kingsway model?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I'll brag a little bit on Kingsway. I think it's an exciting accelerator. I think we take, and I'm not in charge of the screening, so don't email me, guys and girls. But we'll take 3 to 4 what's called OIRs, operators in residence, in a year, and basically they're looking for companies to purchase and partner with and to grow ultimately, right? And then once you make those purchases, then you move over to a president's role, right? So actually very common dynamic. I mean, Alpine and some other folks do that as well. It's just not, again, it's not a fund structure. So there is a significant difference there in what that looks like and feels like. But yeah, that's, so we take, 3 to 4 a year that are on the bench, so to speak, or at least looking. You might not feel like being on the bench. And as they complete their initial purchase, and usually there's follow-on purchases as well, then they'll move over into that operating role. Yeah.
And do you do the searching, or has Kingsway already found the opportunity?
No, so that's a little bit different too. We strongly believe that the operator should be diligencing the company, should be making the relationships with prospective owners who are selling their company. That's sort of dynamic. So that is different than the private equity model, which generally is there's some sort of large deal team associated with the mothership.
And what of your own ownership in the business that you searched for and acquired?
Yeah, so we do get equity in the businesses that we purchase. We get a minority portion of equity, and that ensures alignment, right, as we're growing the business.
And you mentioned that there's likely to be follow-on acquisitions in many cases. So are these always or primarily buy and build strategies that operators and residents are doing at Kingsway?
Yeah, primarily it's buy then build. I think they're running. Most of the operators are running. I would say a platform model. They're not running necessarily an aggregator model, which is more of what we're doing in the trades. So that is a difference there. But they've, the other, I was just talking with them yesterday. Actually, a bunch of the operators were in Chicago, and many of them have completed a second. A second acquisition, not all, but many, or are in the midst of it.
And to ask you to speak on Kingsway's behalf, if you can, what is the big vision here? Is it to build a holding company of lower middle market businesses with very experienced operators who are aligned with equity?
I want to stay in my lane here. There's a bunch of great investor relations material, so I'll point us to that website. But it absolutely is to compound long-term value, and and I think it's under the leadership of JT, our CEO, who's outstanding. a very humble man, and he's really revolutionized and streamlined that strategy.
So Kingsway Financial, it's been a public company for decades, is my understanding, coming from the insurance and warranty world, and then starting a search incubator is a newer strategy within the last half decade or so, of which you are one of the operators in residence, starting out as a searcher and then going into now being the operator of your particular vertical, which in your case is plumbing. Is that all correct?
Yeah, that's right. And we started with plumbing. We're not going to stop there. But yes, that's generally correct.
And so looking online, because it's a public company, so we can see the financials. It looks like the TTM is about 119 million of revenue for Kingsway overall. How much of that comes from the plumbing department that you lead, or from the search platform overall?
Yeah, and some of that may be a little lagging too, because we've made 4 purchases. I'd have to look at the numbers here, but we've made 4 purchases, 3 of which were in plumbing in 2025. One was in an oil and gas services provider that's not mine, but to answer your question, plumbing on a TTM basis is just over 17 million in revenue as it stands today.
So you're a substantial portion of this public company now.
I'm a small part of it. I'm a team player over here, so I'm a contributor.
Give or take, 15% of the overall revenue comes from your department. Sure. And then how many other searchers or platforms have Kingsway supported so far?
I think we're close to 7 or 8.
So 7 or 8, and so let's go with 7 to be conservative. I have no idea what the average revenue would be. Maybe it would be in your annual reports, but it sounds like a good chunk of the 120 million of revenue in Kingsway overall is probably coming from this, what you call the Search Accelerator, KSX.
KSX is growing, and that I think there's a lot of tailwinds in that segment, right, compared to some of our legacy segments.
And so you have a very perceptive CEO here who saw that our legacy business was perhaps in a very mature industry or didn't have the competitiveness for scaled growth. So let's instead start an SMB aggregator of sorts, copy the model we've seen in private equity, and see if we can deploy capital and grow and scale through acquisitions in more of a conglomerate way, in that it's not in that same vertical of insurance and warranty, but it's diversified across many industries. But it wasn't a natural extension to the original legacy business. This was truly a greenfielding, a new business within a business, and it's still in the early stages. But the idea is, as it is for many holdcos, to probably redeploy earnings into more acquisitions over time.
That's right.
How have the early acquisitions been financed? Because I imagine the sources and uses are different from what they are for typical independent sponsor deals when they get 2 or 3x EBITDA from a senior lender and they raise the rest in equity on a per deal basis. I mean, you're a public company, so you probably have a different capitalization.
Yeah, correct. I mean, most recently we did a PIPE. This was, again, I don't want to speak too much for, it's all public, but most recently we did a PIPE, right, to fund some of the most recent acquisitions. And then some of the other activities involved, a disposition of a company that was, that brought cash into the business and to invest. So.
I see. Okay. And so just to clarify there, the last item you pulled up there was you have divested, or Kingsway has divested assets, and instead of distributing that in dividends, they've chosen to reinvest it in KSX. And then I think you mentioned a PIPE, which Googling quickly here, it's a private investment in public equity.
Rob, you had mentioned that you had searched. earlier in your career,
Yep.
didn't buy a business.
That's right.
So contrast, if you would, that unsuccessful search with searching under Kingsway. What was different? What do you think there is to learn from the different approaches to, or the different, what you had at your back in the two searches?
The biggest one was, I would say, skill was the different. Basically and forgive me for this, but I think there's like three skills, right? Fundamentally, that are needed to buy and then grow a business. And the first is, an ability to source. The second is an ability to underwrite. And the third is an ability to actually operate the business and have an idea of what you're doing. And of course, the third is the most important. Anyway, to me, anyway. But each of those activities,
says the operator.
Yeah, says the operator, right? Nothing against the. I guess I need to be careful. But and in a private equity group, each one of those roles is specialized generally. And broken out, right? And so they really are skills, and they're separate disciplines. And just to be blunt, I was wholly unskilled at all three, over a decade ago. And depending who you talk to, I might be wholly unskilled at all three still.
But you did make it work this second time around.
Yes.
So you had gained some skill somewhere in there, or was it? Or was it all of the kind of support that Kingsway provided that allowed you to make it happen?
Yeah, I think it's a confluence of factors. And, praise God. I mean, we have three great companies, and I couldn't be more, pleased to serve them and frankly, to serve our plumbers. That's who's doing the actual work, okay? Turning the wrench. Praise God for that. Two, yes, I learned, even a dummy like me, learns and, was involved, thankfully had been involved in, a couple pretty successful aggregators that purchased, went from zero to about $1 billion over 4 years.
This is Alpine?
Alpine was one, Compass was another. And so, was fortunate enough. I mean, it was just dumb luck, I think. God's grace, I should say. But was fortunate enough to be on board operationally, both of those journeys, for some portion, some longer than others. And you learn a lot when you're working at that pace, when you're running at that pace. You learn a lot. I got a front row seat to easily over 100 purchases. And had integrated over, I think I'm on like 35 or 36 personally. So you get a lot of swings at the ball. And look, I'll tell you, I made a lot of mistakes too. That's part of the deal, right? That's part of the school of hard knocks, is you got to stub your toe from time to time and get egg on your face. So when you're working at that speed, yes, you will learn. Even someone like me, you will learn, and that was a benefit. And then I think third, Kingsway is a platform, right? And you have the benefit of a great back office. You have the benefit of a lot of best practices. You have the benefit of great funding, right? And a terrific board and CEO who have done all this many times over. So all that has tremendous value when you put it together.
So dozens of acquisitions and integrations that you were involved with. It may be hard to pull out one or two of the kind of key lessons learned, but I'll press you to do that. When you reflect on all of the experience you've gained versus your first ill-fated search where you didn't know what you were doing, any big thing or two jump out at you as like what where I really was just never going to get anywhere was X or Y?
Yeah, it's funny to call it ill-fated. I think it was a valuable experience in its own right. A couple things stand out. Operations. Okay, I'm just gonna beat the operations drum for a minute. You have those three skills: sourcing, underwriting, operations. Operations, that third skill, and by the way, again, in my selfish view, the most important, that will make you good at the other two. It will help you in the other two. So I would, I don't know who all's listening, but I would encourage you, and I'm still very much on the journey, but to get sharp on everything to do with operations, right? Get sharp on those unit economics. Get sharp on, how you solve bottlenecks, right? And sequencer and parallel. Get sharp on all that stuff.
Isn't that the version of industry expertise that you're talking about here? If you understand the business and the ways to deliver value inside of it and the way to make it more efficient, then you can also add value more during underwriting and also by sourcing deals that actually are good and robust.
Yes. That's exactly what it is. I think the much more natural way to add value to the business is to have experience in the industry. I don't think that's a shocking statement at all.
When we graduated from business school, all the rage was to go either to San Francisco and work in tech or to go into private equity and work in finance. These days I hear, beyond the burgeoning world of search, the most attractive jobs are to go to work for Alpine, where you were, or Shore Capital Partners and take these operator roles or executive roles in portcos because you're going to learn so much. Do you think, what are your thoughts on that, this having dabbled in that world so much?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think Alpine and Shore are terrific, and you get a lot of experience real quick, and I think the universe, I can't speak to Shore, right? I've, not lived in their ecosystem, talked with them, not lived in their ecosystem. But for the very narrow place that I was on the Alpine side, I think, I was shocked, frankly. They gave you, it felt different than previous shops that I'd been at, because they gave you so much latitude that, really if you thought it made sense and if you could rationalize it and justify it, and then you were given a pretty good bit of latitude to go make it happen. It was very entrepreneurial.
Going back to KSX, and you were also a searcher formerly. How are the criteria different in terms of which targets they look for? To the extent they're not identical, what would be things that Kingsway really likes that searchers may not? Or what are things that Kingsway wouldn't touch that a general independent sponsor would be happy to jump on?
KSX, we're really focused on, I would say, my lane is fairly narrow, right? The skilled trades. But I don't know that the industries that I've seen from others have differed all that much from what I see in other, either private equity shops or independent sponsors. I don't know that there's I wish there was, some amazing new industry that only we had discovered, but I think it's very similar to the industries that are generally being pursued. We are slightly, I would say we've top graded the industries from, again, this is just what I've seen. We've put the bar a little bit higher, and I'll give an example. I'm going to drag an industry around here, but landscaping, that's a tough industry, and a bunch of private equity groups are in it. That's killer. It's a brutal one. So we have not, that's not, as far as I know, on the, in the sandbox, right? The industry does not meet the quality standards that we have, at Kingsway. So,
well, I think my insight there is that there aren't categorically SMBs that you won't do that other independent sponsors will very commonly do, and largely you're playing in the same sandbox, to use your word, as the independent sponsors, and it kind of makes sense. Your CEO saw this asset class as an opportunity to build a compounding engine within a public company that can be a really nice place to reallocate and reinvest dollars earned, and create a much larger entity out of that.
Rob, what makes plumbing a better industry than landscaping? Or what makes landscaping such a hard industry?
Yeah, well, and I'm not, past high school. I've not been in landscaping, but I think it's tough, right? Anytime, there's no licensing, as far as I know, unless you get into some, really different area. There's no licensing. The risk there is, fairly, if somebody botches your grass or your bushes or whatever, I mean, okay, that's bad, I guess. It'll grow back, but pretty bad. I'll contrast that with plumbing. If you get something into the water supply, or just botch a repipe or something, right? You could do hundreds of thousands of dollars in pretty short order, or you could even threaten human life, right? That is, it's just a different level, and that's why many times licensing is required, right, in the skilled trades. So it's just a little bit of a different setup than landscaping.
And this is a positive feature, the licensing and the the stakes.
Can be. Yeah, can be. Catch me, depends on the day. No, it's a positive feature. It's a positive feature.
Rob, we talked a little bit about industries and how private equity tends to think of them in terms of innings. What inning an industry is in, and with respect to being consolidated or rolled up. You had some pretty strong opinions on that. Could you share those with us?
Sure. Yeah. I think if I was sitting, again, I don't know where the viewership is necessarily, but I would give that a lot of thought. If I was just completely agnostic. I mean, if you've got a specialty, go for it, drive for it, right, and use that to your advantage. And it's the whole circle of competence thing. But but if you're agnostic to it, I would spend a lot of time thinking about that in the future of the industry, because it's going to dictate the next 10, 20, 30 years of your potentially of your career, hopefully in a good way, right? And so just to name, and industry consolidation goes through these phases, and if you understand those phases and have that perspective, and I'll give you the first two, I won't give you the last two, but if you understand that, then it's very helpful. It lets you know where you can play, how you should play, and kind of lets you skate to where the puck is going, sort of thing. So the first phase, just to call it out, is the financial buyers, right? The financial aggregators. And you can look across any industry consolidation. You can look in funeral homes, you can look in pests, you can look in all sorts of manner that has been consolidated and aggregated up. But the first phase are the financial buyers, right? And they don't really have an operational edge, and they're just, but they, the industry's good. They figure out how to buy the asset. They figure out enough on structuring, and they do quite well, right? And then that brings in, that kind of ushers in the second phase, which is an operational edge, and and again, that what happens is if you are not able to generate an operational edge and you move into that phase, you're either dead or you're exited, you're purchased, and that's it. It's over. So again, I just keep going to, I'm going to beat the ops drum on this a number of times. But my sense is for plumbing, we're beyond the financial, part of this, and now we're in the operational part of it. And then there's a third and a fourth phase, and I'll let you figure out what it is. But long story short, if you don't adapt and refine, then basically, capitalism is very unkind to those who are not able to do that.
And these phases are, as you said, kind of progression in an industry's consolidation. And so knowing when you get in what the next phase is going to be, and preparing yourself to play kind of at that next to compete at that next phase.
Can you play at that phase? And I know next to nothing about. I'll just use pest control as an example, right? It's in like the fourth phase, and this has been pretty, significant. Anyway, when you look at the structure of that industry and when you look at the things happening, it would be very difficult for. Now, of course, I've never been into it. I've never been in it, right? So it should be difficult for me to just go in there and compete. But when you look at the structure of that industry, and funeral homes, some of these other, some vet med, some other things that really are much later stages, be very, very difficult to go in there without. Again, having the skill set that's required for that stage to go and win. That's the only way you're going to generate outsized, growth for your company, right?
If you're in a model like Kingsway, where you are not looking to exit to the next buyer, does it change the calculus of the stages?
Yeah, I mean, in a way, a lot of private equity buyers are not. Some are operationally sound, some are not, right? Some are just pure financial. Hey, we're going to rope these things together and we'll get some multiple expansion and we'll fix something, maybe, and then we'll sell it off, and hopefully somebody else is going to come by. So yes, it does change. It totally changes the nature of the game when you want to work in an industry for 10, 20 years. Changes how you interact with people, changes how you, plan your business, how you hire people, how you deal with your customers. I mean, it changes everything. Your time horizon really does dictate how you play.
Well, and this idea of the stages kind of would loosely correlate to kind of the price of businesses in an industry.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so people who are thinking about both entering but also exiting a business, they need to be especially attuned to the phase. And maybe if you're a long-term hold, an indefinite hold, you care about entry price, obviously, but you care much, much less about exit.
Yeah, that's a good point. But you have to. I guess the point is you have to get better to survive.
Right. Because the industry matures and is becoming more competitive, and to just continue to compete and have a healthy business, you're going to need to compete right along with everybody else, regardless of whether or not you're looking to exit.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Operationally, you've got to, it's continuous improvements. I guess one of the last bits of thought I would have is just around who you can serve well. And, what I mean by that is, I fundamentally believe that it's, in a position of management or leadership, your job is to serve those who are for lack of a better word, doing the work in the field. They're doing the work in the front office, right? It's your job to equip and enable, and ultimately to serve them. And where I see folks get into trouble is when they get it upside down, and they think that it's like the genius with many hands sort of idea or concept, right? That's not at all what it is. It's much better that 30, 40, 100 or whatever people are enabled and supported rather than those 30, 40, 100 supporting the one. And I think there's a huge opportunity for that. People call it different things, but that servant leadership, I think there's a huge opportunity for that, in all sorts of lower middle market businesses, provided that whatever structure of the company that you join supports it, because different companies reward different things and different behaviors, right? So if they allow for that servant leadership behavior, then I think that's a tremendous way to serve the folks that are doing the real work. So,
and that was something that Kingsway, you were explicit with Kingsway about wanting to do, and there was alignment there.
100% alignment, and some alignment in past places too. I don't want to bag it, but I think that's really important to understand what game you're playing, and how you're gonna step into an organization, right? And I've found that when you come, and I think it's biblical too, for what it's worth, when you come with a servant's heart and a desire to serve others, and we are a service organization, that it's actually well received in the transition. Transitions are always hard, but if you come in with a servant's heart, and they know it's, and the people believe it's genuine, and there's some healthy skepticism out there. That's all well and good. But it is, it's welcomed. And, that would be my last thought for those stepping into especially the trades business is just serve your team, serve your people, and come in with a servant's heart.
Well, Rob, you had mentioned to us that you wanted to call out and thank really the people at your organization.
Yeah.
So this is probably a perfect moment to do that.
Well, thank you, Will. So I'm going to spit out a bunch of names, okay, and just thank them because really and truly, they're this is great to talk with you today, but a lot of our plumbers probably at this very moment, I can pull up a screen, are probably in some crawl space and wading through who knows what, right? And so I would be remiss if I didn't say thank you to them for serving our customers. And so I'll just say a few names: Mark, Ernie, Josh, of course. Thank you so much. Leland, Charles. I wanted to add Matt there, Ed, Jeremy, Evan, and Stacy, and there's a number of others, and too many to name. But I would be really remiss if I didn't. Fran, thank you. Say thank you to some of the folks that were doing the work to keep the company really growing and moving. So thank you.
Well, it's a wonderful gesture on your part, Rob. We haven't had anybody do that, and in another podcast of mine with hundreds of episodes, I don't think I've had a guest go through a roster of names thanking them. So really, a great tribute. So I'm really glad that you did that. So thank you.
Thank you. I didn't have a list, but there you go. That's
okay.
I'm sorry if I missed you. Get you next time.
It's like an Oscar speech right there.
Yeah, exactly.
There you go.
All right, Rob Casper, thank you for your time today. Thank you for giving us a window into being an operator in skilled trades, acquired business, an operator in residence at Kingsway. We appreciate the insights. We'll link to your LinkedIn in the show notes, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
Hope you enjoyed that interview. For more like it, subscribe to Meeting Other Minds wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also watch us on YouTube. And check out Minds Capital, where Niklas and I are partners alongside Max Lummis. Minds Capital invests equity in independent sponsor deals. So if you're a sponsor with a deal under LOI, please visit mindscapital.co to start a conversation. There's also an investor tab on our website with information about partnership opportunities and future fundraises. See you in the next episode.